My name is Anna, I'm 24. 3 years ago, my father lost everything. He owned a small logistics company. Nothing huge, just enough to keep us stable. Enough to pay for my college. Enough to make him proud when he said, "It's ours." Then a larger corporation stepped in, they called it an acquisition. We called it the end. The deal was fast, aggressive, legal, and clean on paper. Within 6 months, the company was absorbed. Within a year, my father stopped talking about the future. He never said he was ruined, but I watched something in him collapse. I learned to hate corporate language, strategic restructuring, market leverage, asset consolidation. They sound harmless, but they're not. 2 years later, I applied for a job at one of the biggest firms in the city. Yes, that kind of irony. I told myself I needed stability, that I couldn't live off anger forever. That's where I met him. His name was Daniel Hart, Senior Acquisition Director. He was 32, calm and sharp, always composed in meetings. The kind of man who could dismantle an argument without raising his voice. The first time I sat across from him, he didn't look intimidating. He looked focused. After my presentation, he leaned back slightly and said, "You think 3 steps ahead. That's rare." I remember the way that felt. Over the next few months, he became my direct supervisor. Long hours, strategy meetings, and late-night revisions before deadlines. He was demanding but fair. He didn't humiliate people. He didn't yell, he expected excellence, and assumed you were capable of it. I admired that. I didn't mean to. It happened slowly. A coffee after a late meeting. A conversation that drifted from work to life. He told me he grew up without money and built everything himself. "I don't believe in hesitation," he once said. "If you see an opportunity, you take it." I should have recognized that sentence for what it was. Instead, I found it inspiring. The first time he touched me, it wasn't romantic. We were both reaching for the same file. Our hands brushed. And something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. But it wasn't nothing. Weeks later, we stayed at the office past midnight finalizing a proposal. The city lights were reflecting off the glass walls. The building was almost empty. "You don't belong at entry level," he said quietly. "You think like someone who wants control." "Control of what?" I asked. "Your own outcomes." The way he looked at me when he said that made my pulse change. I knew the risks. Office relationships are complicated. Power dynamics are messy. But it didn't feel manipulative. It felt mutual. The first time he kissed me, it wasn't reckless. It was slow and measured. Like he was giving me time to pull away, but I didn't. For the first time in years, I felt like my life was moving forward instead of recovering from the past. Until the day I walked into the archive room. I was researching a past acquisition for a comparative analysis. Old files, old deals, and old signatures. I wasn't looking for anything personal. Then I saw a company name I hadn't read in 3 years. Miller Freight Logistics. My father's company. My stomach tightened. It couldn't be the same one. There are hundreds of similar names. But when I opened the file, I saw the address, our address. I sat down. The acquisition date matched the year, everything fell apart. I turned the page slowly. Executive authorization. Final approval signature. Daniel Hart. The room went silent. Not physically, but inside me. The ink was sharp and deliberate. The signature confident. He didn't hesitate. I stared at it for a long time. And suddenly, I wasn't looking at my boyfriend. I was looking at the man who signed the paper that ended my father's company. And he had known. Because right under my father's name it said, family-owned, sole proprietor. He hadn't bought a corporation. He had bought a family, and I had fallen in love with him. I didn't confront him that night. I went home. I sat in my car in the dark for almost an hour, staring at nothing. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was procedural, maybe he just signed what someone else decided. But I knew how this company worked. Senior acquisition directors don't just sign. They lead, they negotiate, they close. That night, I called my dad. I hadn't asked him about the deal in years. It was like reopening a wound we both pretended had healed. "Do you remember who handled the acquisition?" I asked carefully. He was quiet for a second. "Yeah," he said. "Young guy, smart, didn't look older than 30. Calm, and didn't flinch once." My chest tightened. "What do you remember about him?" Another pause. He said it wasn't personal. That the numbers didn't work. That if he didn't take the deal, someone more aggressive would. My father gave a short, dry laugh. He almost sounded apologetic. I couldn't breathe properly after that. The next morning at the office, Daniel acted normal. He handed me a revised contract, asked about my presentation, touched my lower back briefly when he passed behind me, and I felt sick. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't know who he was anymore. That evening, I walked into his office and closed the door. "We need to talk," I said. He immediately noticed something was wrong. "What happened?" I placed the file on his desk. He looked at the company name, and I saw it. Recognition, a flicker, and gone in a second. "You handled this acquisition?" I said. "Yes, I did." He didn't lie. "Did you know it was a family business?" "Yes, I did." That word landed harder than I expected. Did you know it would destroy them? His jaw tightened slightly. The company was already collapsing, he said calmly. Debt was stacking. Competitors were circling. The acquisition prevented bankruptcy. Prevented bankruptcy? I repeated. My father lost everything. He lost ownership, Daniel corrected quietly. Not everything. The cold precision of that sentence cut deeper than anger would have. You saw a spreadsheet, I said. We saw our life. He stood up slowly. At the time, I saw a company that couldn't survive another quarter. I saw employees who would lose jobs if the transition wasn't controlled. I saw an opportunity to integrate assets before a hostile takeover did worse. You saw leverage, I whispered. He didn't deny it. Yes. The honesty hurt. I worked for years to get into that room, he continued. To be the person trusted with decisions like that. If I hesitated, someone else would have signed it. I looked at him, trying to reconcile the man who held me at night with the man who dismantled my father's work. If you could go back, I asked slowly, would you still sign it? Silence filled the office. This was the moment. He could lie. He could say no, he didn't. Back then, he said quietly. Yes. Something inside me cracked. I wanted to prove I could handle deals like that. I believed I was saving what could be saved. And now? I asked. He looked at me differently then, not defensive, not cold. Just aware. Now I understand what it cost, he said. That's convenient, I replied, my voice shaking. It's not convenient, he said sharply. It's devastating. That word hung in the air, devastating. For him, or for us. I didn't know you, he continued. If you had known it was my father, would you have stopped? He didn't answer immediately. And that pause said more than anything else. I don't know, he admitted. And somehow that was worse than a yes. Because it meant ambition still mattered. I stepped back. I don't know how to love you and not resent you at the same time. His face changed at that. For the first time since I met him, Daniel Hart looked uncertain. Anna. No, I said softly. You built your career on decisions like that. I'm the consequence of one. I walked to the door. Was it worth it? I asked without turning around. His answer came quieter than I expected. I don't know anymore. I left before he could say anything else. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. His confidence, his ambition. The way he kissed me. The way he signed that paper. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just in love with him. I admired him. And now I didn't know if that admiration had been built on someone else's loss. The next morning, the entire office buzzed with a new acquisition announcement. A mid-sized family company. Struggling, similar numbers, and similar structure. And Daniel was leading it. And that's when I realized I wasn't just choosing between love and anger. I was choosing between who he had been and who he was about to become. There was something else he didn't know. Something I had only found out a week earlier. I was late. At first, I blamed stress, lack of sleep, emotional overload. But the test in my bathroom didn't hesitate. 2 lines. Clear and certain. I sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time, staring at something that felt impossible. Pregnant with his child. The timing felt cruel. Almost deliberate. I hadn't told him. Not because I wanted to trap him. Not because I wanted to punish him. But because I didn't know if I was staying. How do you tell a man you might leave that you're carrying something that will bind you to him forever? Every time I looked at him after that, there were 2 versions of the future standing between us. One where we tried to rebuild something. One where I walked away and never let him know. When the new acquisition was announced, something shifted inside me. It wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about the kind of man my child would grow up knowing. Would he be the man who saw leverage and vulnerability? Or the man who learned restraint? That afternoon, I almost told him. He was standing by the window in his office, reviewing the new file. Daniel, I started. He looked at me. Calm, focused, and certain. The same expression he must have had when he sat across from my father. The words froze. Not because I didn't want him to know, but because I didn't know what I wanted him to be. If he chose the deal, I couldn't raise a child watching that kind of ambition justify itself. If he walked away, was that change real? Or temporary? That night, alone in my apartment, I placed my hand over my stomach and whispered something I didn't expect to say. Please don't make me choose wrong. A week later, he came to my place. No suit and no boardroom composure, just him. I stepped down from the acquisition, he said quietly. They reassigned it. I know. They'll still close it. I know. He looked tired, not defeated, aware. I don't know how to undo what I did, he said. But I know I don't want to keep being that version of myself. I studied his face. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't performing regret. He was different. And for the first time since I found that memo, I saw uncertainty in him. Real uncertainty. I almost told him then. Almost said, "You're going to be a father." But fear held me back. Because if he changed for me, that was one thing. If he changed for a child, that was something else entirely. And I needed to know which it was. Months passed. We weren't together. But we weren't strangers either. He left the firm, quietly, no announcement. When I asked him why, he said, "I thought power meant winning. Now I think it means knowing when not to." I'm 3 months pregnant now. He still doesn't know. Not because I want to keep him in the dark, but because I'm still watching. Watching who he becomes without knowing there's more at stake. Because if he becomes better only when he knows he has something to lose, was the change ever real? And sometimes I wonder, when I finally tell him, will I be giving him a second chance? Or handing him a reason he should have found on his own? If stories like this hit you, subscribe.